Alright guys, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for hanging out with me. Today we're going to do a sort of a look at that session prep and session recap for the Marsh King, which is our second session in the campaign we just kicked off that I'm taking the reins in and running on it. We've had a shift in Dungeon Master from a long-standing campaign that one of my friends was running, and now the baton's been passed to me, so I'm jumping in and we're running that, and the tone shift is pretty big. Sometimes that is just kind of what comes with the territory, is that you'll find that one DM style is way different from another DM style. And so the more DMs you play with, the more ideas you get about the ways that tabletop role-playing games can be run in general, but especially something like D&D, and see that's wildly different. So my other friend runs more of a narrative-based campaign, more set-piece adventures, things of that nature. I wouldn't say more dungeon crawling, but definitely dungeons are part of that, but it's sort of a story beat kind of campaign. And one of the swaps we did for this campaign, and I sent out some questions, and I've gone over that in a different stream, talking about trying to get input from players about, hey, what kind of things are you looking for in a campaign, so that way I know what to build, because that's sort of my method. Is I want to know what you guys are interested in, so that way I can build whatever you guys want to. Just like at the end of the session yesterday when we talked about it, I went to say, hey, are you guys having fun? They're like, yeah, of course we're having fun. Are you having fun? And I was like, well, yeah, I'm always going to have fun. I'm pretty adept at taking a situation and being like, I'm going to be able to find my specific bit of fun in whatever I'm running. So for me, that's setting this up and seeing what the characters do and how they interact with the world, and riffing off of that and figuring out what they're doing. And we had somebody that, the roommate of one of my players where we were playing, looking at it and be like, hey, are you like improvising this? Is it all written down? I was like, it's kind of both. I have some things prepped, and we also have a lot of improvisation, because the prep is very useful for me to know sort of what I think is gonna happen in the session, but no prep survives first contact with the players. And so whatever they decide to do is kind of up in the air. So after that, it's a lot of looking at the prep that I have and where it slots into the things that they're trying to improvise, and if I need to create new stuff on the fly, doing things like that as well. So it's a whole thing. But let's go ahead and jump in. So like I said, this is the Marsh King. What I want to do is I want to show just a little bit for anybody who might have missed sort of our first session, just a brief synopsis of kind of what happened in the first session, because in the second session we're starting off on a ferry, so it's important to kind of know how we got there. So let's go ahead and jump over, and I'm going to pull this up, and we're just going to take a quick, I'm not going to dig through all of these because it's got the full sort of session bullet points, and we don't need to look at that. We just kind of need the top level look at it. So let's look a little bit at what happened in that first session. Here we go. Nice, it's already pulled up. Let's do it this way. We do it this way? Yeah. Let's do this, and let's hide that sidebar. Give us just a little bit more room. Actually, what we can do, I think, is we can actually just hide. Can we hide all that? I don't want to put it in full screen mode. Does that do that? Okay, yeah. Alright. Perfect. So we started off, it was Spring Main. There's an in-world calendar that we've gone over a little bit. So we had 4 of our players there, and 1 player was missing in the first session. It was one of those funny things where we had everybody sit down and we did our big session 0 character creation. That was a whole process. I've gone over those questions kind of in depth, and there were people like, wow, this is really more in depth, and trying to figure out how you fit in the world and what your player character is like and all that stuff. And then immediately after that, in the first session, one of our players is like, oh, by the way, I'm going to be out for X number of weeks. Like, all right, well, we're going to still play. So just be aware that your character's kind of a cardboard cutout in the background. So they're along for the ride, but they are not doing anything important. And they're not taken into consideration for things like encounter balance and stuff like that, because I know they're not going to be there. And I'm not going to try to do things that are specifically tied to their character, but if we get into an arc where it's kind of focusing in on their character and they're not there, we might run some sort of like guiding, a little side adventure, a little side dungeon and something like that, or I might take the week off and let somebody else run a one shot or something like that. But here's the first session. So, they hired a guide, Alexei. They met to embark from Maptis Shabira, bound for Palais Vepajan by reed boat. So they're jumping out and running across. We are doing some... If you've watched the solo RPGs series, I do this overland travel, and that, rather than tracking hours during that, I basically have them track Constitution saving throws. So, the Constitution saving throws DCs escalate in difficulty the further they travel in the day, the more stuff they do. So that kind of naturally gives them an idea of not just what time of day it is, but also how tired and expended they are in the day. And then they make the decision about when they're going to take the long rest, rather than being like, oh, well, it's nighttime now, so you got to take a rest. So instead, I let them sort of handle that. So if they want to push it and go further, they can do that. And if they don't, they can settle down and hunker down. And as was in the first session, they hunkered down for their first rest, or like at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was really early in the day, roughly really early in the day, because we had some poor rolls, and we had one of our players has had terrible lucks with their Constitution saving throws, and I think they've only passed one. Maybe two now. I think maybe two. So they've been really suffering from exhaustion. We're using the 2014 Legacy exhaustion rules, because I don't want a bunch of floating modifiers. I'd rather have the things that are like, you have disadvantage on checks, you have half speed, you have disadvantage on attacks and saving throws, because I feel like that better represents... I think that system did a lot better representation of what exhaustion feels like for the player characters in universe. So they did that. They talked with a whole bunch of people. One of the things that happened, and there were some things that they could have gotten into, some adventures that they could have gone on in the first session. It's very PC driven for this campaign. So it's about them deciding what they want to do and what they're going to go on. I'm going to throw a bunch of seeds at them, a bunch of adventure seeds at them, and hooks, and see which one they strike like a fish. Are they going to hit the lure and go after it or not? Or are they going to pass it by? I don't know. They're going to make that decision, because that's one of the things that they told me in the sort of campaign input when I asked, do you want me to lay a story out in front of you, or are you guys interested in kind of crafting your own story? The responses I got were very much, well, we want to do sort of like a PC driven one. So it's like, all right, well, it's up to you guys to take the adventure. We can play an entire campaign where you guys basically don't go on any adventures. It's going to be a little bit more like Stardew Valley if you don't do that. It's going to be a real cozy game where you travel around and do just basic things. And these first two sessions have been like that, and they're having fun with it. So I'm making sure to check in with them and be like, hey, are you guys still having fun? Because we haven't had a combat yet in 2 sessions. There's been opportunities for them, but you guys have made decisions to kind of go around them or choose not to go down that path. So I just want to make sure that everybody's fine with the sort of low amount of combat that we've had. They've actually not taken any hit point damage yet. In these first 2 sessions, they've only taken really levels of exhaustion. And now everybody has had at least 1 level of exhaustion that's been playing. So they do that, they get across, they're basically having to portage, they're carrying these reed boats along with them as they're traveling. They go up to the hills, they met some NPCs, they met this Ardeth character who was investigating what they thought was some arson fires in the plains that people were setting. And then they decided not to follow that trail again. They're deciding to not go on the adventure. And then they climbed into the hills and talked to some young goat herds. And that's where they made camp. And then the next day, they struck camp, they said their goodbyes. And before noon, they got to Sorlix Batlog Keshti, which is the bald cypress swamp fairies. This region of the world that they're playing in is very... the language is very... Iranian kind of context, so it's kind of a mix of things like Arabic and Farsi and Persian kind of mixed together, so that is sort of the vibe. So there's a lot of names, and I'm throwing a lot of proper nouns at them, and there's a little, they're a little overwashed with it, but I want to reinforce, like, hey, this is, I'll give you sometimes the common name on this, like this was Bald Cypress Swamp Fairy, but I want you to know that this is the sort of language that's in the background, even though we're speaking English, because I don't know any of those languages, but I wanted to use them to talk about place names and titles and important things, so they understand that this is sort of the culture and society. It gives them a more immersive feeling for what that feels like in the game. One of the characters had lost some rations in the boat when they were going. We did have a very interesting interaction. One of our players has decided to play a player character who is technically a slave, who is doing this mix of gladiator, trying to buy their freedom, trying to earn their freedom, mixed with sort of a gap year Rumspringa kind of thing, where they have this 2-year period where they can try to, because they're very warrior based and they are owned by a mercenary company, so they have this 2 years to basically build their own renown, to go out and do adventure, to show their capabilities, and basically the people around them, the society around them, will kind of sign off on them and be like, yes, this person is good at what they do, they're right and kind and honest and valorous and brave, and do all the things that would make them a good person to have and to wield power in society, and through that they can sort of earn their freedom and go on to pursue other things. They can pursue becoming a Ghazi, which is sort of like a religious Knight Templar kind of character, which is kind of pulls them into the feudal system. This is the area that they're in, the kingdom, is more of a caliphate, so it's got this very strong religious structure to that, and I'm really leaning in on the religion that we're putting into the world. And that was pretty much it, and it was a very, very easy one. The first session was a lot of RP, especially between the player characters within the party, trying to figure out the vibe of people trying to figure out who my character is and who are the people that I'm adventuring with. So they're trying to figure out those relationships and understand all that. And now they're starting, and also interact with the world and understand how the world works and who these people are. Because I'm also really focusing in on I don't want to say it's too much minutia. I don't think it is. But it is sort of, they're interacting with a lot of normal, everyday people. It's not only tavern keep owners and store. It's not store proprietors, bar keeps, innkeepers, minor nobles. That's the sort of thing you kind of expect, usually in a general D&D game. And this one's like, in this last session, they talked with a rat catcher. They've been talking to goat herders. They've talked to guys that work on a ferry. They did meet some other people. They did meet an adventure broker, which was very interesting. But that is this last session. So let's take a look at the prep. So I'm going to show you the prep. This is not the prep for this is the first session sort of recap, basically for my notes. So let's look at the second session. And this kind of gives you an idea of how I'm laying out sessions, at least at this point. So this was our session. So we had 3 of our characters too. We had 2 that were not there. And so my idea is that as long as we have more player characters than not, we're going to continue to play. I don't want to hold up the campaign because one person's out, because as anybody knows who's ever tried to coordinate any amount of TTRPG game on any sort of regular basis, somebody's almost always out. It happens a lot. So I want to make sure that we keep the campaign moving so it doesn't. One of the things that happens is you take a couple weeks off, or a couple sessions off, depending on how far apart your sessions are. People forget what's going on, they get distracted. The Dungeon Master's like, well, actually, I've been thinking about running this other campaign, something else is taking my interest, something else is shiny and new, and maybe I want to go do that. And I'm trying to avoid that one. Like, we're in this, the truck keeps going. We have the campaigns gaining inertia and momentum, and we're going to keep moving with that. So it's only if we're going to have 3 players out, or obviously if I'm out, then we're not going to play. And even if we do have 3 players out, one of the things that we'll do is I'll try to be like, oh, well, we're still going to meet, preferably. And we're either going to do board games, or somebody else can run a one-shot if they want, which kind of gives me it gives everybody a palate cleanse for the campaign, especially if we play a different system. But it also gives me the opportunity to kind of take a week off, because we're running a weekly game. And I'm like, well, that's nice. That's nice every once, because I also don't want to get burned out. Not usually a problem that I have with campaigns, but you run 20 sessions back to back and you get a little tired. It's very easy to do. So, here's what's going on. So I've got this in this this is part of my calendar, and it just tells me what the average people are doing with the sort of common peasanters. Remember, I'm doing a very sort of medieval Renaissance, just bog standard campaign sort of backdrop as far as the setting is. But I'm really trying to, like I said, dial in and show kind of what everybody's doing. And this is in a very medieval Renaissance kind of style. 80 to 90% of the population are farmers, are just straight up villagers who do farming for a living. And so I think it's helpful to know what 80 to 90% of the population is doing at any time. So right now they're digging their vegetable crops and their home gardens and getting prepared because it's still in spring. It's still relatively early in spring. So that's what they're doing. Weather, and I really only started putting in weather because we have a druid in the group and they're using the cantrip that lets them portend the weather. And they seem really interested in doing that, so I'm like, alright, well I'll make sure that there's weather for you guys to take a look at. And I have a weather little hex flower that you roll on that tells you what the weather is. So basically I've set it up where, okay, it starts like this. It's going to start off muggy and heavy rain, and then it's going to move on to being hot with some light rain, and then it's going to be that for the rest of the session. So instead of doing it like by a day part or anything like that, I'm just kind of keeping an eye on the time that we're playing per session and be like, okay, well I know that the first third of the session, we play for about 4-ish hours usually. So first hour to hour and a half it's going to be muggy and heavy rain, then it's going to be just hot with some little scattered light rain, and then that's going to be it for the rest of the session. So they have this idea of what that's going to look like. So when they portend weather, they feel like they get that benefit out of it because they're playing a druid. So they have that idea to support the fantasy that they're trying to play. So it starts off with the group saying goodbye to Alexi, and they board the Keshti, that's the ferry, for Palais Island. And they're trying to get to a very specific place on the island. And we knew we were going to have one person out for at least 3 weeks, 3 sessions. So I was like, alright, well I don't want to immediately jump into the heart of the adventure and they have to like do a lot of catch up. So this is kind of a little prologue. This is just kind of them getting there that I wanted to focus on. And this is just it's kind of filler. Also because I said this is a very PC driven game. So if the players don't make a decision about an adventure to go on, then they're just kind of futzing around and not really doing a whole lot. So it's time. So this is them kind of figuring that out. So we see here they have the ferry crossing. Right up front we have that Constitution saving throw DC for this basically scene or area that they're going to be in. Also, obviously, if you are part of this campaign, don't watch this. What are you doing? We're going to be talking about the campaign. Don't do that. We're talking about the prep for it, for things that did not happen. So if you were watching this, you're spoiling it for yourself. So don't do that. Or if you do that, that's on you. So we had, basically, I came up with 3 pretty standard NPCs that they could interact with on the ferry, because I wanted to be, they're just kind of going out there before I started to introduce something immediately. I know we talk a lot about having a purposeful start or a fast start, or an exciting start, whatever you want to say, where you start the session kind of off with a bang, but this was like, this is they're kind of in a smooth transition spot, and I wanted them to have this opportunity to get to know the people on the ferry before things start happening to the ferry. So that way maybe they would be inclined to deal with these specific NPCs, want to protect them, etc., work with them, those sorts of things. So we have Japheth, who is a tiefling, is a bandit. They didn't realize that though. They haven't figured out. And they talk to them because they are off in the ferry, staring off at a point on the shoreline. And so our rogue goes up and talks to him. And it's like, hey, what are you looking at? And he tells them, it's like, oh, there's a keep that's being rebuilt over there on the shore. You can just kind of see it through the trees. And I'm just kind of wondering, seeing how it's going. The truth is, they're probably going to try to see if they can rob it or not. They're like, I don't really know who's building it. And then they talk a little bit about sort of the interactions of the world and be like, this is still a very feudal society, so for somebody to be building a fortified position means that they need permission from whoever the local baron, which is called a bay in this setting, Baysada. They need permission from Baysada, or Baysada's probably going to march in there with some men at arms and put the thing to fire and sword. So it's likely that they have that permission, but they don't know who it is and what they're doing. So they're curious, being abandoned, be like, is this an opportunity for something? And unfortunately, they didn't do a very good job on some of their insight checks to try to glean any of that information. Sometimes that happens. And we're throwing a lot of NPCs out. Like I said, we're throwing a lot of hooks, a lot of potential quests, a lot of things that you could investigate. Like, tons of stuff is happening in the world. Every time you kind of talk to somebody, you're going to find out something a little bit more about the world and the local area, especially as you're traveling around. So it's kind of about what are the things that my players, the group, wants to lean into to chase down and go after. And I've told them before that not everything in the world is leveled specifically for you. So there are things you can learn about and decide to chase down and realize that it's much higher level or much lower level than you. And higher level, they're level 1 right now, so everything's probably higher level for the most part. But there are opportunities for them to gain some information or lock away that information, come back and take a look at it, and of course things will have updated and changed about the situation at that point, depending on how much time has gone by. So that was Japheth. They spoke with Nyx, Caleb did, and Caleb is our party cleric, and we've got the players did a really good job of sort of leaning into the amount of religion that's in the world. They wanted some more information about the religion, so I was like, okay, here you go. And it's like this 6-page primer about just the one religion in the world. The one religion their character's familiar with in the world, because there are multiple religions. And so they're using it and being like, okay, this is a person who is of the faith and goes around and does these little things, and there's lots of little daily prayers, and kind of these are things that normal common people do as well, and show how important it is in a setting that doesn't have something like a deep scientific method and all the things that we kind of take for granted in the modern day. A lot of things that get explained as to how the world works is the gods and religion, so there's a lot of that they deal with. When something bad happens, it's probably related to the gods. When something good happens, it's probably because of the gods. Especially when you can't explain when something weird happens, it's probably because of the gods. So that's sort of the de facto answer for a lot of things that happen in the world that are hard to explain or unexplained, at least at that moment. So that player's did a really great job leaning into that. So they talk with the gnome pilgrim. They have a little badge. This is something that this player was like, oh, they want to pick up some. In the first session, they were like, oh, I want some like knickknacks and little things that show about the places that I visited and travel. And then I introduced them to these little pewter badges that was a real thing that you got as sort of a medieval pilgrim, that was just like the little badges like, I went to a place and all I got was this stupid t-shirt. It's like that, except I went to this place and all I got was this stupid little enamel or little pewter pin. And so the pilgrims has that pin. They talk about, oh, I'm coming on the back way from a little pilgrimage to one of the nearby monasteries to talk with monks. I think it's monastery. Cloister. Let's say cloister, because I can't remember if they're nuns or monks. Or if it's just a commune. They went to a religious place. And they're on their way back, and they talk about that. So they use that to be like, oh, well, I live in this place where the ferry used to stop, and the ferry's actually moved locations now. Because they've decided to bilge the marsh around it. They're actually making a polder and they're pulling the water out so they can work on doing some more logging in that area. They're cutting down a bunch of jungle forest. They're deforesting the area. They're like, hey, and the community there is kind of dying without the ferry because the trade route used to run through it. So a lot of people I know have moved on to where the ferry now goes, which is a few miles away. And they're like, well, I wanted to go get some guidance about, like, what is the right thing to do? Should I stay here? Should I maybe move? I just wanted some clarity, some insight, so I went to talk with the monks and priests and see what, maybe they have some insight as to what I should do. And so they learned a little bit about not only how common people interact with the religion in the world, but also things that are just kind of going on in the world. They learned that, hey, there's this place that you're about to land to. If you want to go check out why they're cutting down a whole bunch of wood, you can go do that. And when they get to the place that they're getting to on the ferryscape, I tell them that, hey, there's a lot of new buildings that are being constructed. And a lot of people seem to be moving here, and the small community seems to be growing pretty quickly, but it's still really small. There's not like a lot of shops or anything like that. There's not a lot of infrastructure. It's kind of booming. It's kind of becoming a boom town because the ferry has moved there, and they're now trying to cut a bigger channel through the marsh to try to make it easier for the ferry to get in and out, and build a new dock for it, and all these things that they're infrastructure they're trying to prepare to grow as a community. So as you could probably guess, now that I run relatively human-centric campaigns, that's just what I default to, and it's just the way that I play. It's like these are trying to give this idea that the NPCs in the world are human and they have human problems. Like, should I move for better job opportunities? I don't know. Let me go talk to somebody who can maybe give me some guidance. Maybe they can talk to the gods. Maybe they know something I don't know. Maybe they can give me some sort of information about what I should do and where I should go and how to live my best life. Those sorts of things. And the last person they could talk to, well, actually there was another person that they talked to that I kind of escalated, and I made it quicker. That wasn't going to come up this session, but there was just a good opportunity for it, so I threw it in. And that was, we had Zarnok, who wasn't really latching on to anything in the beginning. They were just kind of hanging out. So I was like, all right, well, one of the things that's on here, and I'll jump back in. So I do this thing where I do these player character timers, where after each session I check to see, hey, when something personal towards your character is going to happen. Usually it's something related to the interest of your characters, or something dealing with your character's background and your setup for that character. And so I knew that Zarnok did the timer roll really well, and knew that something was going to come up, and I just chose one of the ways that they relax. They like to play gambling games, specifically dicing. So I gave them this opportunity to dice with somebody, with a traveler that they meet along the way, and if they do, they get a invitation to play at the Broken Seven, which is a private game hall in Palivavachan. So they did that. They were successful, and they did get that invitation, which is actually, it looks like just like a brass coin that's got these clipped edges around it, and it has a 3, and there's an X in the middle, which is actually cut out of the coin, and a 4 on the bottom. They'll find out more about that later. I guess I can tell you guys, if you're a player, again, stop watching this. So it's actually a key for the door of the hall. So that's actually a circular key, and then there's going to be a rod that you stick through the middle and put it in and twist it. And once you twist it and open it and remove the rod, the coin will fall down through a slot. Sort of, if you've ever played like an air hockey table or anything like that, where they have the slot where the puck falls out. It's like that, so on the inside of the door you can get your coin back. So that's just the idea. And that's about as much as I've prepped for the Broken Seven. So we'll find out what happens when they get there. But they were able to do that, and they met somebody who was... It was very interesting, because one of my players took it as this NPC was flirting with them, and I was like, this NPC is kind of being weirdly predatory towards them, actually. But it's interesting how that gets interpreted sometimes. There we go, Switch 2. So they did that, and they got that, and that was really exciting for them. They really loved it. And now they've got this cool mystery item that they need to figure out. And they have a place, they have a name of a place, and they don't know anything about it. And they've got this item that's tied to it, and they don't know anything about the item. So they've got to figure that out. And then Zarnok also went off and talked to Lily, who is this heavily scarred gnome, who is actually an adventure broker. So it was the right person for them to strike a conversation for. So it's a freelance, well, what in something like Shadowrun or Cyberpunk that we call a fixer. This is somebody who you go to for jobs and tries to match people who want jobs done with people who can do jobs, of varying levels of legality and capability. So Lily kind of tells them a little bit about what's going on, a little bit about, not much about herself, But she does talk about this, the rumor of Okeanos' true tomb that's true tomb that's on the island. Okeanos is the person who founded the city that the majority of the party are from. And now they're going to the island. So they're like, oh, and so they're all very familiar. All the player characters are very familiar with this name and kind of the basic story about, oh, this guy came here to found the city and then died eventually. And so there is sort of a mausoleum to him in the city, but there's also been this rumor that somewhere on the island is his true tomb. And so that's something that they could go search down, but they are probably under-leveled for that. But she also tells them about an adventure thread that they hadn't picked up on yet, which is about some tapirs that have died in the jungle north of the settlement that they're about to land at. And she's like, oh, well, you know, I heard this as I was passing on the way out, so if they're still looking for trouble, if they're still having trouble with that, you could probably look into that if you wanted to. And then once you guys have a little bit more experience under your belt, find me and I might be able to have some jobs for you. But you guys are kind of under my level at this point. I don't really deal with things that it's not lucrative for me to chase down jobs that are not this profitable. Not this, you know, the bigger the problem and the more pressing it is, the more money that kind of comes with it. So she's kind of chasing bigger and better contracts, essentially. So they have that, and as Kayla goes and talks to the captain at the back of the boat about that, somebody spots, because the person who could have spotted did not roll well on their perception check, so they failed to be the first person who spots the Padishah Madab, the Marsh King. So one of the NPCs do, and they start panicking because, and of course the player characters don't really know. And they start screaming, and people on the boat start yelling about the Padishah. And I was like, all right, well, you guys speak the language, so you understand that they're talking about the king's here. You gotta get out of here. So they start panicking, and the captain's trying to calm them down and be like, hey, all right, look, if we stop making a bunch of noise, the king's probably going to leave us alone. So trying to quiet everything down. So there's a little skill check. They have an opportunity. There's 3 of them. There's 3 different groups of people. And they kind of mechanically explain to the players. There are 3 different groups of people on the boat. So each one of you can go to a different group and try whatever kind of skill, however you want to interact with them to try to get them to be quiet. And then, depending on how well you do, depends on whether they have Vantage, Disadvantage, do a straight roll, because they're going to make a stealth check. Each group is going to make a stealth check. If we fail most of the stealth checks, we draw the ire of the Marsh King. And you're going to have to deal with that. Unfortunately, 2 of our groups did fail, and the means they chose to do it were very interesting. The cleric did full on try to give priestly counsel and was like, I'm here, everything's gonna be all right. We're gonna trust in the ferry crew, and you know, I'm gonna pray, and we're just gonna hunker down. And that was the only person who actually passed. One of the characters tried to manhandle some people, and the other characters ended up sort of like slapping people, thinking that they were like sort of in shock and trying hysterical and slapping them and trying to get them back. Those, unfortunately, they did not roll very well. And it was very easy breezy. I did some mixing. I do like to use the mixing rules, which is a variant from the 2014 Player's Handbook, where you can actually mix the ability modifier and the skill or tool proficiency. So for some of these, I was like, all right, well, if you're going to intimidate them in this way, you can use intimidation and have that bonus from the proficiency, but you are using your physical mass to manhandle these people, so you can add your strength as well. So you can add your strength and your proficiency bonus for intimidation instead of having to use charisma for that, because you're doing a physical action, so that makes more sense. But unfortunately, there we go. Sure. I don't think that's correct. I think it should be becomes. Anyways, they failed. And so I let them know, hey, this is the situation. So you failed, and the captain's like, all right, split moment decision. We have to make a decision. Are we going to push the boat forward, or are we going to try to reverse course and go backwards? Because we're out in the open right now, and we need to do one or the other. And I'll let them know, hey, if you try to go forward, it's more difficult. You're going to go into the marsh, and the thing is that the king has a much better ability to get around the marsh. And they're like, oh, well, they had some questions about, like, the king. They're like, oh, well, is the king actually able to get through the marsh? Because they were thinking that it's like a big fish. Pretty natural to say. It's like you see a dark shape in the water. You go, oh, yeah, that must be a fish. And I'm like, it's actually not. And it's like, you learn very quickly that you can intuit both by looking at the shadow and the way that it moves, and by the way people react, that's not in fact a fish, it is a giant eel. And they're like, oh, well, the giant eel can definitely get through the marsh with no problem. That's not going to be an issue for it. They're like, yeah, so you can go forward, and I use my effort track. If you haven't seen effort track, basically what we do is we take a DC, and then we multiply it by the number of rounds and the number of our PCs, and they need to, depending, they can decide to do whatever checks or whatever they want to do, whatever thing that they try to do, and that helps add to the DC. If they meet or beat that DC and the amount of rounds that they're trying to do, they pass. If they fail, they fail. So I need to know what that was. So if they go forward, they need to get a total of 108 or better in 3 rounds. Or if they go back, they only need to get 72 in 3 rounds. So it's easier to go backwards in the open water and be able to change course and maneuver the boat, the ferry. So they decide to go back, which is fine. So it takes them away from their destination. And of course, if they fail, I'm like, well, something's going to happen to the ferry. I'm letting you know that it's going to attack the ferry. And I did let them know. They were pretty good at intuiting it, but I did make sure to tell them. It's like, you guys are first level adventurers. Something like this giant eel is probably beyond your ken at this point. Fighting it is always an option. You can always choose to fight it. I'm letting you know. These are your sort of bumper rails, is the DM to be like, that's probably not a great decision. This will probably go very poorly for you if you try to stand and fight this thing at this point. And they're like, yeah, got it. Wasn't going to do that anyways. They're like, we kind of got that. All right. But you never know. Sometimes you have to be ultra clear with players, because there are a lot of TPKs that happen just because they don't understand that this is really kind of an unwinnable fight sometimes. So you need to make sure that it's very crystal clear to be like, you can fight this thing. I would not recommend it. It is a bad idea. Your characters would think that it is a bad idea. It's sort of like if you imagine you were first level PCs in that scene in Lord of the Rings where the cave troll attacks when they're in the Mines of Moria. They're like, that's a kill room for a first level party. Now, a lot of those guys are seasoned adventurers. Sure, I mean, Aragorn's not obviously a first level ranger. He's clearly a much higher level character. Legolas is a higher level character. Gimli's a higher level character. Gandalf is for sure a higher level character. But if it was just the hobbits in that room, I mean, the hobbits would be dead. The hobbits are not getting out of that room by themselves alive. So take that into consideration. So you want to make it ultra clear, because there is this sort of abstraction that we're doing just by playing something like D&D, is that I have an idea of what the scene looks like in my mind, and I'm trying to convey that, but each player individually has a slightly different version of that scene in their mind. So I'm like telling them, it's like, no, this is a large eel. It cannot swallow the ship whole, but it can definitely swallow people whole. Like, this is a very massive creature. This is not, and it's in the water. This is not a thing that this is not a good terrain for you to fight on. It's a really bad thing to fight. It's a bad idea to fight it. So just try to make that crystal clear. I found that's useful. Yeah, I'd love to be able to do that diegetically, like in universe, and convey that, but I'd rather break the immersion a little bit just to make sure that we don't end up with a TPK because everybody decided to make a bad decision because I didn't communicate very well. I want to make sure I'm communicating correctly. So when you, as players, make stupid decisions, well, that's your fault. I told you what was happening and you guys decided to do the dumb thing. So that's what happens. So they got away. They rolled actually incredibly well, including one natural 20 and I think a natural 19. So they crushed these that easy DC. They got I think they got like 78 by round 2. So they were well done. I was like, oh, you guys crush this. You guys are easily able to reverse course of the ferry and start maneuvering it around, and the captain does a great move where he kind of slips it in behind a rock, and the Marsh King runs into this giant rock and kind of stuns him for a second, which gives you the ability to like move further away from it. They move into the marsh kind of laterally to the side into a dry spot, and everybody jumps out and grabs the ferry and sort of pulls it up on land so the eel can't get to it. And that was sort of the end of the encounter. So it actually ended up being not too bad. So it was really kind of a dual layer scene. So they could have just knocked the stealth check out of the park and not had to deal with the chase, not deal with anything. They could have sat down and could have been a real cool like little tense thing where there's this big shadow that travels under the ferry slowly and circles around it for a second before moving on. But they screwed up that part, but they were able to get away from it pretty easily. They did give him an idea. So again, we're getting into the session, still haven't had a combat yet. Now this one, like I said, would have been a bad idea, but they could have fought it. There's plenty of opportunities to do violence upon the world. You just make the decision about whether that's something you want to do or not. So we'll pull that back down, and so we did that, we did the chase. So they made it to I said village life, it's a hamlet. There should really be hamlet life. It's not important now. We did our Constitution saving throws. You can see them escalate. So they go from 8, from there 12 in the next scene, and then they're going to go up. But that's kind of the end of the day. I figured that was probably going to be as far as they were going to get, because I didn't know with the Marsh King how long that was going to take, because it's kind of potentially 2 to 3 encounters kind of rolled into one. If they end up going back, they got to travel back, and there's more opportunities to talk to people and things to do. But we ended up skipping over the rest of that travel and just put them right into the hamlet, which actually means that this part right here, they did not visit this settlement at all. There's another little settlement on the way there. They didn't stop there. The ferry doesn't stop there because there's a land bridge that you can get to when the tide is low. So that one of the things that kind of put the pressure on the ferry was that they have to go when the tide's high, or else they're going to get stranded in the ferry. The ferry's going to get stuck on a sandbar somewhere. And that's definitely not where you want to be. So they moved ahead, and they didn't do anything with this one, so they moved down to the island hamlet. So this kind of tells you, they got there, I knew that they were, based off of their last interaction with the Keshti village, that they were probably going to bum around and do bumming around kind of stuff. They're going to do town time, NPC talking kind of things. So I guessed right, and that is pretty much what they did when they got there. And at this point, it was sort of the middle of the day, I guess? Maybe a little bit in the afternoon. Caleb, our cleric, is feeling awful. He has, like I said, I believe in the entire game so far, he's only passed 1 Constitution saving throw. So he was at his 3rd level of exhaustion. I was like, he is falling. It seems like he's falling ill. Like he's starting to wheeze and sneeze and cough a little bit. So he might be getting sick. But they made it to the island hamlet. They followed up on the dead taper pack. Zardock did that. Let's see. I have notes from the session too. I actually took, and I've placed those somewhere. Oh, I think they're behind the screen. Let me grab them real quick. Give me just a second. I'm gonna grab them. Boop. Alright, which is what I'm looking for. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this. And I can also show you kind of what like a map of like what the region is. Now I'm doing a thing where I'm not showing the players the map. So they're having to get by kind of somebody in the world where they don't have accurate mapping, because accurate mapping is not a thing that really existed in that sort of time period. All right, so where are we at? Yeah, the group reaches the hamlet and disembarks on the island. So they're on the island proper now. That's the important thing. And they go about kind of talking to people. Zarnog follows up a little bit on the taper threat, and everybody else kind of screws around, essentially. Caleb, because he's got so many levels of exhaustion, is like, I'm immediately trying to find a place to stay. You know, where's the inn in town? I'm like, oh, well, here's a new thing that we're going to learn about the setting. There is no inn. There is no inn or lodging, like commercial lodging, I should say. There's nothing like that in this world. You have to have a relatively large settlement for there to be actual lodgings. So you guys have to talk to people and see if they'll let you in their homes. So there's one thing that happens a lot in this world, in this campaign setting, is there's a rite of hospitality. This idea that if somebody asks you for lodging, for basically meal and board, or room and board, is that you are kind of, it's very sort of Christian charity kind of feeling. It's like you're kind of obligated to provide that by the means that you're able to do that, and to a social class that makes sense. So none of these people are noble, so they don't really have to worry about that, putting commoners out and something like that. So they're all commoners, so they don't really have any trouble doing that. So Caleb immediately finds somebody. He's like, hey, can I stay with you, and I can pay you and stuff. And he's like, that's great, but I'll just let you stay in my home. There's like we'd be happy to have somebody who's a man of cloth in our home. You can bless my home and do those sorts of things. So he goes with some person. They all, which has been common for this campaign, is they have all scattered to the wind. Often we've not been very good at the player characters staying in one area very long. It's something I find is very particular to this specific group that I play with, which is very interesting. It's one of the things that I'm also trying to do as a player, and I think this is something that only kind of comes up when you've been a dungeon master or game master, is how difficult it can be to run when everybody decides to split the party up. Because it limits your ability to do combat encounters, it limits your ability for basically people to play the game. Because if you have, let's say that you have 4 players, and each of them decides to go do something different. Now each of them only gets 25% of the game, because they're only in 25% of the scenes of the game. And that means that 75% of the time that they're at the table, they're sitting around waiting for their turn, which is way worse than waiting, 10 minutes for their next combat turn or something like that. This is even worse. So it's really tough to balance that, but it is also part of your responsibility as a player to be like, well, I'm also gonna make things easier for the DM. So that is one of the things we talked about at the end of the game. At the end of each session, I'd like to be like, hey, do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, things you'd like to see more of in the game, things you'd like to see less of in the game? Just try to get a temperature check and how everybody's going. Generally, you just kind of get back, oh, it's fine, we're having a good time. But then one of my players was very nice, was like, hey, is there anything we can do for you to make things more fun for you? And it's like, well, I'm always going to have fun. One of the things you can do is stay together a little bit more. That just allows us, the game, to move at a faster clip, because otherwise it takes 4 or 5 times as long to cover the same amount of time of stuff happening when you guys are all spread out. And there's fewer scenes that I can run. Like, I don't want to get into a combat with only one character and then everybody sitting around for even longer, because we all know in D&D the combat's the thing that takes the most amount of time to play out at the table. So I don't want a bunch of people sitting around or being really bored or feeling like things don't, because I can't let the other characters get too far in the day, time-wise, because then I have to catch up with this character who's been spending all of their focus in 6-second rounds. So it's a balancing thing. So it's helpful if you guys stay together, and this came up a lot during this session, where just as we're about to see, where the two of the characters go off to investigate the tapers, but they didn't take the one character with them who has a good wisdom score, which would have been very useful in that situation, who would be able to do things like have better nature checks, have better survival checks, be able to find their way, not get lost, be able to understand some of that stuff. Or, ideally, they would have taken a druid with them, but our druid was one of our players that was missing. But it happens. But yeah, that is helpful. So the group found their lodging. Zarnok decided to sleep rough. Zarnok, again, is our fighter who is also a slave. So that kind of makes sense. The social dynamic would have been a little bit weird. Like, somebody probably would have given him lodging, but it would have been kind of a weird social dynamic because they're definitely not of the same level as that person. Caleb stayed with a person that he realized as soon as he was having dinner with them that they are the town rat catcher. I just rolled for it randomly. Actually, I had him roll for it. I had the player roll for it, and it's like, I think he just literally asked him, like, hey, what do you do? And I was like, oh, well, he's probably just a farmer, but I was like, I don't know. Everybody's a farmer, so let's roll for this one since you actually asked the question. I rolled for it and ended up with the rat catcher, so I made sure to explain that, you're eating this stew, and then the guy talks about being a rat catcher, and then you start thinking about the food that you're eating and go, oh. Caleb, the character, undeterred by this. And it's like, well, we just learned something very interesting about Caleb. Caleb is not picky when it comes to food. That's what we learned. He's probably eating rat. And Severin, our rogue, decided to stay with a couple in their almost finished home. So Severin has his sort of background is that he's a cook. He was a cook for a tavern in the city, and so he has the cooking proficiencies. So he was like, oh, well, I'll pay for my lodging by going to market and buying some ingredients and coming back and cooking these people a nice dinner. And so he does that, and they're very appreciative of it. He rolled pretty well. Actually, no, he rolled pretty poorly, actually, now that I think about it. But I was like, these people are super basic commoners. The fact that you put spices in your food is, that's already Michelin star ahead of kind of what they probably are eating on the day-to-day. And he spent quite a bit on ingredients. He spent like a gold, almost 2 gold on ingredients. So I was like, hey, you got quite a bit of stuff. So you made good stuff. Certainly more than they probably spend on their meal usually. I think that was it. Oh, so we did roll for, this is when our D12 roll came up to see if anything happened to them overnight. Everybody was fine except Severin, who ended up rolling up a random encounter. And woke up to things buzzing outside. And ended up not checking on it. They thought about it, but didn't actually open the shutters to go check on what was outside. And then investigated in the morning to find that there was a pretty large puncture hole in the shutter of the window outside of where they were sleeping. And was able to intuit that, talking with the people they're staying with, it was, it's probably sturge, or sturges, multiples. And then talking about, that's kind of weird. They're usually kind of a later monsoon season is usually when they show up, so it's a little early in the year for them to be swarming. And that leads into when they meet up in the morning, Severin and Zarnog start talking about the things, the dead tapers and all that stuff. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's probably sturges. Oh, yeah. So they have that, and so they decide to go off and investigate. Caleb is still suffering from 2 levels of exhaustion, so he's like, I'm not really going to do anything today if I can avoid it. And so he didn't. We did also find out that Caleb's character had... We found out that Caleb's character had never had any sort of... sounds like any alcoholic beverage before. And so he spent the day with the rat catcher, and they were knocking on doors to try to get somebody to brew up a pot of like homebrewed ale for the night. And they weren't having a lot of success, and then eventually Caleb pulled out some silver and greased the wheels of negotiations, and they were able to get somebody to agree to that. So they're brewing up a pot of homemade ale for everybody. A cauldron, if you will. The other two ran off into the jungle along with Hakim, who is sort of the person Zarnok was talking to about it, just a local farmer. And they run off into the jungle, and he's trying to tell them where he saw the dead tapirs, and he's just a farmer, so they get kind of turned around in the jungle a little bit, and it takes them many more hours than they probably thought it was going to take them to find the dead tapirs. But they do eventually get there, and they are able to see, oh, there are definitely puncture wounds in these tapirs, and that's definitely consistent with what we found about the shutters, and so it's probably surges. They're like, all right, well, let's go back. We don't want to hang out here, and we're not going to take any of these back. And of course, this time, because we knew from Lily that this had happened a while ago, it stinks real bad, and these bodies are pretty bloated at this point, and been torn into probably by some animals. So they decide to go back, and as they get back, they realize that everybody's kind of knocked off early from the fields, and they've come in because rumor has spread that there's going to be an ale. Penny ales are going to be served today. And basically, Caleb had spent the rest of his day being of a servant to the community, going around, and all the commoners wanted him, all the peasants wanted him to come bless their homes and their fields and do the very priestly calling of being a cleric. So he's running around doing that, and that's pretty much how he spent the rest of his day, slowly moving his way through the community, being pulled at the elbow by everybody around him to introduce themselves and try to get the blessings for their homes and whatnot. So it's very kind of, you see this, that I'm trying to immerse them a little bit more in the community. Zarnok woke up in that morning sleeping rough, and he does these sort of like, he's a fighter, so he does a lot of these, in a soldier background, so he does a lot of these, but they're kind of like martial arts katas. He has these forms that he goes through where he practices his work and his footwork and his blade work, stuff like that. And I was like, oh, well, there's a bunch of the kids that have found you doing this, and they're watching, both scared and curious at the same time. And he tries to put on a performance, doesn't do a good job, but as you finish and start to turn back towards them, they let a little shout and giggle, and they run off, and just kind of show them it's like, hey, this is a living, breathing place that people kind of do stuff, and they have a normal day that they go about. And there's plenty of trying to give them this idea that this is a community you care about. If you want to, you can understand a little bit about these people and how they live. And really kind of pull them. One of my things that I'm always trying to do with the campaign is try to pull the characters to feel like they are one small cog in a very large machine that is the living world. And make them feel like that. And give them this idea is like, hey, this is a problem. Maybe you care about some of the people in the community. Maybe you want to deal with problems that happen to them, and when things happen to them, you feel bad about it. You're like, oh, that really sucks, and I feel sad, and I want to help them. And that's the sort of thing that I'm trying to encourage with the players, trying to grow within the player characters, that they have this feeling of belonging, and that they are tied to these communities, and they have a place within the world. So that is that's what happened. So we basically ended with them coming back into town and the door finally opening to the alewives' home, and everybody lets out a cheer, and they're going to have penny ales, and they are going to... they were able to share what they investigated with Caleb, and they are going to try to track down the Reeve and see if they can talk to them about dealing with the Sturge problem, and see if maybe there's going to be some sort of pecuniary reward and some sort of filthy lucre that they can maybe get as part of that, or some other sort of reward. Again, being a small farming community, probably not a ton of money, though the more than it used to have, because it's growing and it's now on the trade route, so there's a little bit more free coinage that's floating around. So maybe they can get something else that will also be of use to them. And that's pretty much the end of the session. So they did not talk to Yazi Takisha, they haven't talked to her yet, she's in a different spot. They didn't hear anything about the buried relic either. And so here's just, at the back end of the prep, is just some interesting stuff that I have these levels of interesting fluff. This is just, if I'm running behind or things are a little boring, these are just things I can throw out there that are just kind of things for them to interact with, just little toys. I think about this, this interesting fluff, if you've ever seen like toys for like babies that have like little spins and rattles and things like that, things for them to just mess around with. That's kind of what this is. What this interesting fluff is. It's like, this is just something that you can mess with. It does have a little combat in there. Didn't really come up. They didn't really come across. They didn't travel too much. They didn't really come across too many of these campsites or have any of those. The only encounter that we ended up rolling up was the one Sturge one overnight, which none of these would have really worked for. I guess I could have given them this one as they were traveling through the jungle for them to take a look at, but I didn't want to distract them too much from what they were trying to do at hand. I think they were already having a tough time being like, oh, we're not rolling well enough with our survival skills to find the place that we're trying to get to. Then we have some NPCs. There's just random NPCs. I used quite a few of these, actually. Most of them on the ferry. And then a few in the hamlet itself. And this is usually just how I make them real quick. We have Rakma, half-elf. So they're pretty androgynous, toned with a thin mustache. I actually used this character was the one that was doing the gambling on the ferry. So I pulled them for that. Dalaba, we didn't use Dalaba at all. Gnome, female, thin, has dimples. I just try to give them an overall like look for who they are, and then one sort of like little detail about that kind of helps me play them or helps let them out. So for this first one, and these are both, I have a little table that I roll on. They're both physical features and sometimes personality aspects. So they kind of stand out. So Rakma has a thin mustache. Dalaba has dimples. Sahar's a bit of an airhead. I actually use this name, but not this character's. I actually threw that for the rat catcher. I think the rat catcher's name is Sahar. Tarek, I use this one. This ended up being the ferry captain. Had a potbelly, was gouty, had a conversation with Caleb, who was not feeling well. And he was like, oh, and Caleb's like, hey, do you have any medicine? He's like, well, I've got this dwarven rye whiskey. Do you want that? That's what I call medicine. It helps with my gout. So that was a little character. And then we did not use Salma, who is dwarf. The F plus just means that they're, I have a little, part of it's kind of gender as well. So we had androgynous kind of person, and F plus just means that they are extremely feminine. Curvy and shrewd, so they get a good mind on them. But didn't use that character yet. And so any of these characters that I didn't end up using, I'll save for next time, and I'll just add a few more to the list before the next session for my prep. So this is just sort of the extra prep, this little improviser helps. Improvisation helpers that kind of help me be like, hey, and this is usually not a problem that I run into. Usually when I'm running games, the players tend to not ask for anybody's name. This time they've been really, really keen on asking for everybody's name. I don't know why. I'm not really keeping track of them, because most of these NPCs are like, well, these NPCs are not going to come up again, so I'm not that concerned about their names. But I did tell them, they were asking, started asking the rat catcher, it's like, hey, what about your parents? Do they still live in the village? I think they were just poking the bear, having a little fun, trying to be like, oh, well, I prep all so much stuff about the world and how the world works and know so much about it. It's like, hey, well, tell me about like the history of this character, and be like, oh, well, I can improvise some of that. But also, it's like, let them know, sort of at the end, it's like, hey, by the way, the more effort you make me put into the NPCs, the more that NPC will become important. So if you keep interacting with the NPC and you decide that you want to learn more about the NPC and know more about them, you're telling me that this NPC will start to become more important in the adventure and or campaign overall. So if you spend a bunch of time with the rat catcher and learn about his family and stuff, he's going to be a recurring NPC. He's going to show up and do a bunch of stuff. We have some random encounters: zombies, Greyus, boggles, bandits or tribal warriors, animated armor, needleplate. Didn't come up with any of these random encounters. Like I said, we only rolled the one random encounter, and I knew that that was going to be an overnight was going to be the Sturge, because that made the most sense. And some treasure. This is just some random stuff that they can find along the way. Now, as I build out adventures, I'll have specific parcels of loot that they'll find. Well, this is random stuff, so if they find a dead body and want to check what's on the dead body, well, they'll find one of these things if they do a good enough investigation check, or if they're looking for, I don't know, they're searching an abandoned house, they find a cache or something. These are all just things that they can randomly find. And some of these have mechanical benefits, like right here they have advantage on their next rations roll if they end up finding this 2-pound bag of flour, because a bag of flour is not really monetarily makes a lot of sense to carry around with you. It's worth 4 coppers, so it doesn't really make sense to store as loot or treasure of any sort, but it is something that is particularly useful to adventurers who need to carry food with them. They're like, oh, well, there's this bag of flour, it will help if you carry it with you today, like one of the bags or whatever with you, or just put part of it into your rations, your food supplies, and be like, well, you get advantage because you got some extra food. So it's unlikely that you will start running out of rations sooner. This hand tool wrap, it's all basically really, really basic things, like this folded canvas. It's a little pastoral painting that somebody's made. Not worth a lot of money because it's very small. And if you've watched the solo RPG, you're very familiar with this. I'm looking down because I'm looking for this, a DM binder. You'll be familiar with these tables. I have a number of sort of, I know you can't really see that, but a number of treasure tables that are in here. They're just kind of minor treasure tables. Stuff you can find along the way. Most of it's like these are trade goods. I also have a 2d6 or a d66 table, depending on how you want to roll it. Or really just how you want to say it. Of pocket contents, just random stuff you can find in people's pockets. And one of them's on here. Which one's on here? So I also left this one, which was a common single-use magic item, so they might find a potion or a scroll if they go adventuring and start searching around for stuff. They haven't done that yet. So this hasn't come up. So these will probably persist, because I don't need to replace any of these. And then the things that I use, I just replace. And that makes prep very easy. I haven't used any of these random encounters, and they're still kind of in the same biome-ish area, and they'll continue to be there for a while. So I don't really need to replace these. Now, once they get into the city, and it's really more of a town, I'll replace some of these with more appropriate town kind of random encounters. Because it's unlikely that you're going to run into an animated armor. Well, you could, but I should say it's less likely that you're going to run into needle blights in the middle of a town. But let's see, what was one of these that the hand tool wrap? Was the hand tool wrap one? One of these came from the pocket contents table. I'm trying to remember which one. It definitely wasn't the keyboard. Virginal. That was a new one. I love doing prep where I learn stuff. I did not know what a virginal was. It's cool. It's kind of like a early prototype for a keyboard. So it's kind of like a harpsichord piano style of instrument, but it's relatively compact, so you can actually travel with you. It's kind of the size, if you've ever seen a hard guitar case, it's kind of like that size. Like, it's still bulky and it's a pain in the butt to carry around, but it's definitely not like trying to move a piano or a harpsichord. Maybe it was this. Maybe it was this pastoral painting. That probably makes sense. It's either that or the hand tool wrap. No, this was from Tools, so it must have been this. Must have been the folded canvas. So random little things like that. Like, why does this person have this? What were they doing with it? How the heck did it end up here? If you really want to spend time trying to figure that out, that's a legitimate question that I will have for players. Do you want to spend time trying to track down why this painting is here? Is that important to your character? Do you care about that? Or do you really only care about, like, the monetary value of it as loot? depending on what you do, depends on what happens in the adventure. So yeah, that is that's everything that kind of talked back about it and everything that we did as far as that. So overall, session went well. I do think that we need to find some way to get combat into the next session, which won't be difficult. Actually, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. It's very light, but I did draw a small depiction of what the Broken 7 coin looks like. Let's see if I can get this up here. Yeah, there we go. So that's what it looks like. It's very interesting, so they're going to have to puzzle that out. Overall, the session went really well. It was, again, a little lackluster. Had a little bit of excitement, but most of it was walking and talking. It's 2 sessions of that, so it's really need to get some more action into the mix. It's been a lot of role-playing, there's a lot of learning about the world, a lot of just trying to get places, so exploration. Really focusing in on that Constitution saving throw as they go around to do stuff. Showing them that, especially as first-level adventurers, like, just getting places is tough. And most of these people are from the city, and with the exception of Zarnok, who's got the soldier background, they're not really, like, have a lot of athletic conditioning about moving around and walking all day and doing that sort of thing. So a lot of this is really new, and that I think that shows for everybody. Zarnok just now got his first, because he's got a higher Constitution score than probably everybody else. And he just now got his first level of exhaustion. So I think that is diegetically kind of showing that this person has a lot more experience walking around and going places and carrying a pack on their back and wearing armor and carrying weapons and doing that sort of thing. So I think that's really, there's a lot of the stats, it's the way that the play and the way that the stats are mashing up. It's whatever that version of Ludo narrative would be. So Ludo something. And the cohesion is really working together. They're definitely in concert. They're working well together. So I always like it when the mechanics and the in-universe world feel like they're on the same page, which is always really nice. What I really try to strive for in the games. So yeah, we want adventure next time. We want a little bit more action. That's going to be easy to do because they've let me know that they're going to investigate the searches. Great. We're going to have a little bit of talkie in the beginning, figure it out, and then they're going to go investigate. And that's what the game's going to be. So next time, this has been a lot of sort of open world going around kind of prep. Next time, this next session of prep is going to be a little bit more standard. We're going on an adventure prep. Like, we have a goal, and we're going to the goal. And we have a clear thing of what we're going to do, and then it's just me about throwing some challenges and obstacles out in the way, some things for them to figure out, some things for them to fight, some things to maybe talk to. They've done a lot of talking, so probably not a lot of talking now. It's probably mostly going to be, probably can run them through a battery, probably quite a few encounters, I think. I think that's going to be my goal, because they haven't had any combat yet. They haven't taken any hit point damage, so I think it's time to bruise them up a little bit. Give them a few cuts and scrapes. And that's sort of where we are with that. So that's everything for this session recap. Hopefully that demystifies a little bit of the Dungeon Master process and shows you, it's really not too difficult to set up. Even something like this is very sandboxy. I can show you real quick sort of what the map kind of looks like, because that could be helpful for you. So let me show you, I'm going to show you the big map. I'll show you the 3 different levels of maps that I have. Actually, there's a 4th one, but yeah, I guess I could show you the world map. That's fine. Region map. And the local map. And let me see, where is my big map at? Oh, not there. Yep, Explorer decided to spin on me. There we go. Thank you. Nope, that's not what I'm looking for. Where's the world map at? World map. Maybe this one. Is the right one? Yeah, there we go. Alright. Let's zoom in a little bit here. and move this, and then I'll share with you. Alright, let me grab it, just so you guys can kind of have an idea of what we're looking at. Let's change the window capture here. Alright, here we go. Oh, that's big. Let me put it here. Alright, let me zoom out. So this is the full world map. Just to kind of give you an idea what it looks like. And our characters are right here. I'll zoom in. So our characters are right here. They're actually in this area. So it's this sort of like inland and Gulf Sea area, and technically a sea because it's quite large. So they're in the sea. So they're actually not on the mainland. They're in between two continents. They're in between this sort of central and this large eastern continent. And then we have the western continent way over there. So yeah, they're right here. And then we can drop it in and kind of show you what this looks like. Well, that's the one. So this is sort of the peninsula that they are on. Or where they started out. So this is... See this map? This should be so this is the area that they started in, and this is the area they're going to, and they just got to. So they just got to this little island off the peninsula. So they traveled through here. So this is where they went out and they were like, oh, we're on the boat, and then we climbed over the land, then got into the water again, and ended up here. This kind of shows you where we are. Boop, boop. So just a little bit more zoomed in. And then our most zoomed in area. And this is the immediate local map, so this is where they're going at. So this is... Over here is this area right here, is where the ferry starts. Then they went down here and right in here. Now, where the ferry used to go is it used to go and go down around the corner here and used to go here. But it doesn't go there anymore. This is where they're doing the bilging and they're cutting all this wood. So you can't get there. So now they're taking this short route into this little village. And this is the hamlet they're in, and this is where the tapers are that they're going to go investigate. So right next to it, real easy. And each of these hexes, just for clarification, I know I've talked about sort of the map levels before. I've got a whole video about that. But if you want to see sort of the scale wise, so each of these scales get smaller and smaller and smaller. This is the smallest scale. So this is what I call the local hex size map. And each of these hexes are approximately 2 nautical miles across. And I use nautical miles because that works very well with this big map, which is longitude, based off of longitude and latitude. And nautical miles are an approximation of longitude and latitude, so it makes the math a lot easier when you're doing the scaling. We're doing something like miles or kilometers, the math gets a lot more messy and has a lot more decimal points and working with all that. So I want to make it as easy for me as possible, so I use nautical miles, which is just a little bit longer than miles. It works out really well for me. I basically consider each of these hexes to be a league. And by league, we mean it takes about an hour to walk across it. So it takes about an hour to get from the village through the jungle into where the tapers are and investigate that. So they came across here, so it kind of tells you how long it took them. So 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour, 5 hours. So good part of the day took off. So it took a good chunk of the day was just getting there, and then that makes sense why when they got there they were looking for lodgings at that point, even though it was still relatively, it was in the afternoon. But they are looking, so that's basically where they're going to start the next adventure for. Let's see. Let's go here. But yeah, that's everything for the prep. Sure. Yeah, go ahead and install an update. Why not? Yeah, so that's everything. So hopefully that demystifies the process a little bit. I hope that's very helpful for you guys to kind of understand. It's actually not that difficult to set up a session. I think this entire thing, well, I can tell because I've got the actual printout, because I'm trying not to run things off the computer. I'm trying to do things, trying not to put a screen between me and the players, so I can focus more on the game and use sort of like the tactile aspects of it. But this is, you know, not quite 2 pages of prep to run that entire session, which is really nice. So between that and using some of a little bit of the improv tools in my DM binder, primarily just looking at, I have a D100 table of NPCs that I use, which is really more like closer to 300 NPCs because each entry offers multiples. That was a table I never thought that would be that useful, and actually it's probably one of my most used tables in my Dungeon Master binder. It's just something comes up when you need to know something about an NPC and they're like, oh, what do you do, or something like that, or who is this person. I can look up their occupation kind of real quick and find out really. That's how I came up with all these guys, knowing what they were. I just rolled them up, like, oh, this person's an adventure broker. And that's what the entry says. They're like an info broker, a fixer, things like that. This person was a pilgrim or other religiously related person, and this one was a bandit. And that's how I found out who they were when they tried to figure out who what's his name? Sahar was. He asked her, it's like, oh, who? Asked Sahar, like, hey, what do you do for a living? He's like, I don't know, roll a D100. It looks like you're talking to the rat catcher for the town. It's just an easy way to kind of throw that in, and gives you kind of a baked-in way to feel like the NPCs are supposed to be there. Like I said, and a lot of what I'm trying to do with the world building sources is make it feel like things feel grounded in the world. And like, he talks to the rat catcher about his job, so he's like, oh, well, you know, I don't want to be too good at my job, because if I'm too good at my job, I don't have a job anymore. If I kill all the rats, there won't be any rats for me to catch. So I always got to be pretty good at my job. So that way people keep coming to me for work, but I'm not so good that I completely eradicate the rat population and or other vermin population. So because he is also a rat catcher and is part of sort of vermin control, they may talk to him about things that he might know about scourges. We kind of danced around that a little bit during the session, but they haven't asked him sort of a pointed question to be like, hey, can you help us with the scourges, or what are, you know, can you poison scourges? How do you attract them? Those sort of things. But that might be something that comes up in the next session. That's it. Hopefully this demystifies a little bit of the Dungeon Master process and what it looks like to prep things, and then how that plays at the table a little bit. And again, this is one of those session running these very open, sandboxy, player-driven kind of sessions, which is definitely not what I would probably suggest for brand new Dungeon Masters. I'd be like, just run the dungeon, run something very concise, very constrained, where you don't have to worry about, well, if they decide to go over that hill, what's over there? Don't worry about that. You don't need to be setting up all those maps like I did. Like, this is for my own personal world that I've kind of run all my games in, and just pick different points and run different things in them. And then I detail the world as I find out more about it. So a lot of this stuff wasn't prepped before I started this campaign. I was like, oh, well, I need to know more about this corner of the world and what that looks like. But for an average game, you really only need to world build as much as you need. I like to do it because I find it fun, but a lot of the world building stuff is not particularly useful to the table. So you should focus most of your prep on being things that will be useful to actually run the game at the table. And then when you're done with that, you reward yourself, your little Dungeon Master, Game Master dessert, as being like, ooh, now I get to build some stuff about the world. Now I get to build out some things they might encounter in the next session if I have time remaining. For my session prep, it might be like, oh, if they go over here, what might be over there? I wonder. And you can start to build things out from there, but you don't need to be like, this is the entire world, this is the pantheon of gods, this is all that stuff. And I have that stuff just because I find it fun. I've been building on this world for a while. Many years. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed if you are a newer DM and feel like you have to do all this stuff. All this stuff is relatively unimportant. The religion in your game religions in your game and gods and stuff like that is only as important as you make them and your players want to make them in the game. I have a player. This stuff probably wouldn't nearly come up at all if I didn't have a player who wanted to play a cleric, and then I very pointedly asked them sort of during character generation, hey, do you want to like lean into the religion aspect of this, or do you want to treat a cleric as just like a different flavor of kind of wizard, sorcerer, and other spellcaster? They're like, no, I kind of want to focus on that religious aspect. It's like, great, we can do that. Let me put some stuff together for you, and then I send them the 6-page primer, and like, here's everything that's kind of going on. Here's things that you should know, and they're like, oh, it's a lot of information. It's like, good. It's all just examples. None of this is ironclad. You can kind of do whatever you want with it. This is just an idea of the gods and things that are important to them, and kind of the structure of the religion, and for you to help find the spot, the niche where your character fits into this entire kind of like dichotomy of it. So that's it. I'm going to take a short break, and then come back and let's talk about some adventure tools. Does that sound good? Alright, I'll be back here in just a minute, so hang on tight. I'm back. Alright, let's jump in. So today I want to talk about like 3 tiny adventure aids for Dungeon Masters, particularly for building out dungeons, but also can be useful for non-dungeon based adventures, some more than others. They're just 3 tiny tools that I've used and I think that are a lot of fun, and I think could be a really easy way to set up an adventure really quickly, and fun little tools. As with anything that kind of comes with adventure tools or dungeon building tools, anything like that, I find that you don't want too many tools. You gotta really narrow down and just use a few. Now, it's nice to have a lot in your repertoire, but only use maybe like 2 at a time, 1 or 2 at a time. You don't want to use too many, or else you're gonna spend more time using the tools than actually building your dungeon or adventure. So I want to talk about, so what is an adventure aid? So an adventure aid is just basically something that allows you, essentially anything that allows you to help your creative juices to build out an adventure, dungeon, whatever it is. Obviously we're going to be focused primarily on D&D, but also there are similar tools. Either you can use the same tools for lots of different things. Well, definitely one of them is definitely meant for sci-fi things, and we'll talk about that. But also, most of these can be interpreted to be used for whether you're running modern day, Wild West, sci-fi, if you want to do swords and sandals, any genre. If you want to do something that's a little bit more, maybe a Lovecraftian, early 20th century Cthulhu kind of game, you can use most of these tools for any of those, because they all kind of work together pretty easily. So one of the reasons that I use it, the challenge that I sometimes find, is that if left to my own devices, I have a limited pool of inspiration that I'm going to draw on. And maybe you've experienced this if you've played D&D or other TTRPGs for a while, especially if you've had one specific dungeon master or game master for a while, and they always make homebrew stuff, like homebrew adventures and campaigns. You may run into this trend. I know I've certainly come up across it on both sides of the table, both sides of the screen, I should say. Both running games and playing games will be like, get into an area that we feel comfortable in, and that's very much a stuck in the rut kind of feeling. It's like, well, I really like running these adventures, and I tend to be pretty good at them, so I run a lot of those types of adventures. So sometimes it's helpful to have these aids, and they help you sort of break out of that mold. Be like, hey, make sure that I'm always kind of doing something different, kind of expand my thoughts, and do things that I wouldn't think of, or allow me to do things that I wouldn't consider. So that's really the most helpful thing. But like I said, it's really useful to keep it really limited down to just, like, I'd say probably 1 to 2 tools that you want to use. And that comes from anything. That comes from, like, if you want to use something like the Tome of Adventure Design, or one of many other adventure building properties. If you want to run 5-room dungeons, then you can use that framework, and then use maybe like a different one other tool to kind of like throw a little spice on there. You can do that very, very easily, and that will help you make sure that every dungeon or every adventure that you build feels more unique than they would otherwise feel. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that we're not getting into a rut where we're kind of running the same thing over and over again, which is really easy to fall into if you're not going out of your way sometimes to break out of that mold. Especially as you run more and more games and more campaigns. You'll find that that kind of becomes an issue, and you want to make sure that that's not it. So let's jump into it. So the first one that I wanted to do is it is my most recent acquisition. This is my most recent acquisition that I've had. It's been a lot of fun. I've only used a little bit, so I'm excited to see what's more. One of the things that drew me to me is that it's multi-use. I'm going to take the things out first before I show it to you. But these are from Inked Adventures. They have an Etsy shop with a print-on-demand aspect. Here's what it looks like. It's a deck of playing cards. They're not just regular cards. They are map and dice playing cards. So it kind of gives you a little example of what it's going to look like on the front here. So it's a standard deck of playing cards with 2 jokers, so 54 cards. But it also has some extra features on it. Let's pull a card. pull a couple. Let's pull like 3 cards. Just kind of give you an idea of what we're dealing with here. And let me pull a Joker, actually. I'll pull 3 cards and a Joker. Let me find a Joker. So the important thing about them, or the feature that I like most about them, is they do a lot of different things, which is really useful. There's a Joker. Because the Jokers are even more special. So, cards kind of look like this. I'll put one up. Let's see how well you can see it on the camera. Up there. I realize that's backwards. There we go. Once Grand Stairs. Kind of gives you... So we also obviously have extra cards. I know this is backwards. So maybe it's easier. Maybe I'll throw up an image later. So this is a Queen of Spades card. And it has some dice notations on it along the top. Because each card comes with a D20 roll, a D6 roll, and a D100 roll on it. And then it tells you a little bit. There's an info card that tells you a little bit. Obviously, kind of hard to do a D100 table in a 52 card deck. How does that work? Well, it explains a little bit about how they make it a little bit more concise. And tells you what the probabilities are for that. But, you know, as a quick use, if you didn't want to pull out a D100 because you didn't have D10s out or whatever, you'd be like, just draw a card from the deck. So it allows you 3 types of different dice that you can use with it, as well as the standard playing card aspect of it. And the important thing, which is there is a title that kind of comes with it, the Once Grand Stairs, and the little, what looks like a little dungeon room that you can see. And these are actually dungeon geomorphs. So let me grab one of the other ones here. This will be a little bit dicey. Let's see if I can get it. Oh, this one. So here's a different card. This is a 3 of Spades. So, storage and unfinished quarters. So as you can see, that's slightly different dungeon morph there at the bottom. And so how this works is that you can actually take them, if you're unfamiliar with dungeon morphs, is you can actually stick them together and you can start building a dungeon. So it's a fun, easy way to build a dungeon. And you can also just use, so they talk about this in the card deck, there's a little explanation card, is that the titles and the dungeon morphs are usually related, but not always. So sometimes if you have somebody who's like, oh, well, we're investigating a dungeon, what's this next room that we run into, and maybe you haven't built out the dungeon, or maybe you're doing it on the fly, and you're doing a theater of the mind, so you don't really draw out the map, and you could be like, oh, the next one, the next room you run into, oh, this looks like a storage and unfinished quarters. It looks like this was still in construction. That construction has been abandoned. And the dungeon, it looks like they were working on it, carving out more room underground, and it's done. They're not doing it anymore. So that's a good way to use it. So why do I like these cards? Well, first, I like the dungeon morph aspect of it. I'm not a huge dungeon morph fan, just because they fall very quickly into, because of the nature of them, forcing them to always basically be able to connect at any side, generally, leads to a lot of, it feels very samey to me. But I like the ideas of them. So I would basically use this as a riffing tool, and then as an idea generation tool, and be like, okay, here are the different rooms that are in this dungeon, here's how they're kind of connected, and then I would probably have a separate map that I make with it, just because I'm not a huge fan of dungeon morphs. But I would use stuff that's on here, like I might use obviously I'd use the staircase, and then these unfinished quarters, it looks like there's a chest in it, so I might add the chest in, something like that. Why do I like them? Because primarily I like them because they're also playing cards, and because I am a fan of Savage Worlds. And if you haven't played Savage Worlds, their initiative system uses a standard deck of playing cards. It's based off of, that comes from the first iteration of Savage Worlds, was a Deadlands Reloaded. If you're familiar with Deadlands, if you've seen something like the Critical Role, they did a small side adventure thing where they ran Deadlands. You'll have seen that they use a deck of playing cards for a lot of things, because it's Old West, so playing cards in a saloon, it's very thematic. So Savage Worlds just kept that, and now there's a lot of It's a very interesting initiative system. I actually like it quite a bit. And so you can draw... Everybody draws cards to figure out where they're going to go. And it's standard sort of rules where spades are the high suit, clubs are the low suit, diamonds and hearts in the middle. Determine who goes first. And then you can pick up perks or edges in Savage Worlds, which are kind of like perks or feats that allow you to do things like, hey, when you do initiative, you can draw multiple cards, or you can change the suit of your cards, and other sorts of weird things like that allow you to change your initiative. And that's a lot. I like it a lot more than being like, oh, you get a +5 to your initiative for alert, which is more D&D style. I don't like that nearly as much. But one of the things that kind of comes with that is the Joker. And that's probably the thing I like most about the Savage World initiative system is when you draw a Joker. So when you draw a Joker in Savage Worlds, it gives you the ability that says, hey, you can take your turn whenever. Most of the time that'll be at the start of combat. You're like, well, obviously I want to go first. But this, in Savage Worlds, that truly means whenever. So that means you can interrupt somebody else's turn. You can decide that you want to take your turn in the middle of the bad guy's turn if you want to. If the bad guy's about to, let's say the bad guy's about to coup de grace an unconscious person, they're probably going to kill them, and you'd be like, I have my Joker, I want to take my turn right now. And that allows you to do that. And in Savage Worlds, you redraw each round. So it's very quick, and it works a little bit faster than die roll, just having people draw cards and lay them out in front of them. Instead of being like, take initiative, then create a list, and then next round, take initiative, make a list. It's a little bit easier to just deal out cards and go from there. So I do like that aspect. So the Jokers are a little special in this deck. So this Joker, this one, so there's two obviously, and they both do different things, but this is Joker B. Dice roll is bad luck. Draw 2 cards. Discard the most favorable result. Map, special card B, GM's choice. Suggestion, the card has triggered a special event. Next card drawn is a unique quest area, ending the dungeon or creating a plot twist. It could be a specific destination or new map with the GM's own design. It might be a change of level, a special exit, or the place of transition, such as a magical teleportation. Perhaps an interplanar vortex rearranges the current map. Shuffle and redeal the cards already on the table. So if you were making a random dungeon live in front of your players, and you drew that card, you could be like, alright, everybody takes the cards back up, I shuffle them, all the ones that existed, and deal them back on the table, so the entire layout, or probably I would then slowly lay them back out, because the entire level of the dungeon has changed. So you can do lots of really fun stuff with this. It's a really cool deck, and like I said, I primarily like it because it's multifunctional, and it's also a card deck, so if I generally like to keep a deck of cards in my game bag, so that way I'm always prepared to run Savage Worlds, and it's nice to have little games like this, like a deck of cards or Munchkin or something like that. If you've ever played with people in person and you find out that one of your players is going to be late and you got free time, it's always nice to have like a little game that you can, or playing cards or something you can pull out and you guys can just start playing something while you're waiting for that last player to arrive, which is very nice. I like Flux for that, but playing cards also work. And you can do some fun games. Or if you really wanted to, you could do some in-game gambling. Just with the party members if you wanted to, or maybe some NPCs, depending on where they are. But yeah, that's our first tool, is this Inked Adventure ones. They're really nice. I really like them. You can really slap together a dungeon really quickly. Like I said, I don't usually use the dungeon morph aspect of it because I feel like it makes kind of samey dungeons, but I like the ideas presented there. And if I'm using this as like these adventure aids as a point of inspiration, a place to jump off from, this deck does that really, really well by giving me ideas for rooms in a dungeon or a location, any sort of location, like we saw with the staircase. There's also a lot of cards in here that are just like a manor house or something like that, like the Grand Staircase, the Once Grand Staircase. So that tells me a lot about the adventure side. You're like, oh, okay, so if that's the first card I draw, then I'm like, all right, we're dealing with some sort of like noble's estate that's dilapidated. Maybe it's abandoned, maybe it's haunted. Already percolating ideas, like maybe I wouldn't normally run that kind of adventure. I wasn't thinking about that kind of adventure, but now here we are. Do I want to do that? Do I want to continue down that path? No, I don't really like it. Let me redraw. I grab a different card and And maybe that's the unfinished quarters, and be like, oh, well, if it's an overland thing, be like, oh, well, now it looks like it's maybe like a barracks that somebody was building, and it's not quite done. And man, what's that about? Let's find out what that adventure's about. It's really useful, really like it. Like I said, it's Inked Adventures on Etsy. If I am smart, I will remember to leave a link in the description. We'll find out later if I'm smart or not. How much I was paying attention. But you can pick it up. These are print-on-demand cards, which I don't like as much. I really wish that they were a not print-on-demand product, just because print-on-demand, at least for me, it feels a little chintzy when I have them. But the quality is actually alright. I'm not saying that the quality is terrible. But it is print-on-demand quality, so if you know what that is, then you know what to expect. Expect that it's a little less polished than the standard commercial item that you might buy. And yeah, that's everything about it. I really like it. I do like the evocative names. There is one that's in there like Songmead Rest Hall. That gives me so many ideas. Okay, Songmead Rest Hall. What is that? Lots of good things. So the next one I want to talk about is Rory's Story Cubes. That's one of the OG ones. They've been around for a while now. If you're not familiar with them, they are sets of 6-sided dice. I think 9 come in a pack? I think 9 come in a pack. I have multiple packs, and there's different versions. You know what you want, but they are 6-sided dice. The thing that's different about them, though, is that they don't have numbers on them. They instead have these symbols on it. I'll show you real quick. Focus. Oh, not gonna focus. Alright. Well, that's a B, and this one was to the side. It's like a little helmet. And so these are just evocative images given to you to kind of like build stuff out. So if I was making, let's say I was making an adventure, and I want this to be one of the encounters, and I'd probably do 3 dice. I like 3 dice, so let me roll 1 more die. I got these scales or measure. So then I have these 3 together. I have a B, this helmet, and these scales or measures. Set of balance. So what might that mean? Now it's up to me to interpret that. That's what I like about it, is just this font of inspiration. Be like, okay, what do these mean? You need to get really abstract about it. The more abstract you get with them, the better this tends to work out. So for B, that tells me that there's something probably big bug related. Maybe this is a big bug encounter. Maybe it's going to be ants, wasps. There's giant wasps in D&D if I'm building something for D&D, so it might be a giant wasp nest. That's really nice. Okay, how do we interpret the helmet? The helmet could be, maybe there's some sort of automaton that takes care of them. Maybe this is a, if I was building a weird dungeon, this might be like a giant honeybee hive. There are these like animated armor automatons who are gathering the royal jelly and honey from, and they are harvesting that. That would be a very interesting encounter. And then, okay, what do the scales or measures mean? Okay, maybe they're weighing it. Maybe they means that they're organizing it and compartmentalizing it and getting it ready for storage. So there's this maybe assembly line of different big clay pots that they're putting stuff into and sealing with wax on top and putting away. Maybe that's what it means. This could also just mean, the scale might just mean that there's a tough choice to make. Maybe there's a tough choice. Maybe this is an aspect where the beehive, there's something with the queen that maybe they're like enslaved, maybe they're unwilling participants in this. And if we have a druid or somebody who has speak with animals, maybe they can speak with the bees and understand more about their plight. And it could be that there may be some sort of toll to pay, because this is also used to measure like money and exchange rates, something like that. Maybe there's some toll that they have to bring. Maybe they need something for entrance. Like whatever the magical equivalent of a key card might be to even gain access to this area. Or maybe it's more importantly to get out of the area. So it just kind of gives you these ideas. So they're really super cool, super simple. Like I said, there's a number of different decks. I think I have the Voyages deck and the Standard deck. There's also just a Fantasy deck, which is one I mean to get but don't have. There's a Sci-Fi deck. I think there's a Mystery deck. So kind of depending on what genre of TTRPG you like to play, you can go find a deck that's right for that. Or the general ones are great too. I used those for a long time before I got the Voyages one. Let me roll 3 more, and let's make another room. So that was already a weird room. That's the thing that I like about the story cubes, is I would have probably never come up with an idea like that for an encounter on my own. I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm gonna have this weird honey operation that's in a dungeon that these automatons are taking care of. Alright, so this one I got a cauldron. Right, that's a cauldron. Yeah, a bubbling cauldron. A footprint, and a fish. I'll pull these up for you guys so you guys can see them. So that's what that looks like. Alright, what the heck does that mean? Okay. Let's riff. Let's say that we were using this together. So let's say that we're in the old grand staircase. The once grand staircase. So this is a dilapidated, like, manor house, maybe? Let's change it. Let's say it's an abandoned merchant guild hall. So there's an entryway with a big staircase that presumably goes up to guild offices on the top, and then on the bottom there's standard hall stuff, as well as like areas where maybe they keep like a warehouse kind of section where they keep stuff. Okay, so let's interpret these, and we can interpret them together and or separately. So the thing that jumped out to me first was the fish sign. Now, I don't think there are fish in here, though we could go with some sort of floating fish or something like that. But I'm going to interpret the fish as this place is flooded. That's why it's been abandoned, or that's why it's dilapidated. So there's rotting floorboards, maybe there's an undercroft that the players can accidentally fall into. It's something fun for them to do, maybe, which tells us that there's like a basement underneath here that maybe that's completely underwater they might have to deal with. Maybe that's got some sort of weird underwater monsters in. Might have some big fish. Maybe it has like we were talking about in our D&D recap. Maybe it's the Marsh King. Maybe there's a giant eel that's down there. Footprints. Somebody's been here already. Like they see passages. Maybe somebody's kind of turned over this room, or maybe they know. Maybe they're chasing somebody specifically that they know is in here. That's a good jump off point. Be like, I need you to recover something from the guild hall. I know there's somebody who's already ahead of you that's trying to grab it. Some sort of bandit competitor who's trying to get that information. I need you to get it first and bring it back. Or maybe you're trying to track down somebody who went in there and hasn't come back out. Footprints are really good for that. Or maybe you find some indication of a monster that's in there. And maybe it's a clue to a monster that you will encounter later. Maybe it's the big boss monster of this adventure. You find something like that. Maybe you find, if I was thinking about a merchant, usually anytime that I think about anything that's flooded and I think about a big bad guy, like a major villain for an adventure like that, my mind almost always goes to Aboleth. Big fan of Aboleth. I think they're a cool monster that don't get used a lot. They're real fun for like mystery games too. So maybe you find some goop, maybe you find some gooped up human thralls, things like that. You can come across that are kind of like out of whack and can't really talk to you very well. And then we have the cauldron. So the cauldron's a little bit weird. So we could change things up and be like, oh, maybe this thing isn't flooded with water. Maybe it's flooded with some other sort of liquid substance. That would be interesting. Or this could also mean the thing that we're going after is maybe some sort of special ingredient for something. Some sort of potion ingredient. If we wanted to do the classic, everybody's sick and we need the antidote for, or we need the cure for the disease that's afflicting the village. We know last time we heard about it, it was in the merchant hall and we couldn't get access to it. Can you go get it? Somebody else is already trying to beat you to the punch, trying to take it from you. Or you're finding the ruins of the Aboleth. So yeah, these dice are so cool. I really like them. They're a really great tool to just like improvise and just help you ideate things that I would certainly not think about, because I tend to run, I don't know about you guys, but I tend to run relatively grounded adventures, so they're trying to be relatively human, and it's just kind of people just being crappy to each other, and or monsters being crappy to people, and or people being crappy to monsters. So they are super useful. I really like them a lot. I think they're a super great way. There's 9 in each set. You divide them up into groups of 3, and really gives you a real easy way to roll them all together and try to figure out how to group them all together. I do think it's one of the... This is probably... Heroic Story Dice are probably the easiest and fastest way I personally have to get off of a blank page. When I'm like, I gotta run an adventure, or a one-shot, or something like that, and I have no idea what to run. I grab the dice, I sit down with them, I roll them out, and then if you ever find a die face that you're really struggling to come up with a result for, you can just re-roll the die. Like, maybe I re-rolled it and I get these. Beans! There are beans here! Get some great beans. There's one that's got waves on it. I'm a big fan of this one. Cave. That tells me exactly where the adventure's at. Alright, it's a cave adventure. Sure. Or maybe it's a burrow. Maybe there's a... Again, if we were doing that that guild hall thing, if that was the adventure we were running, and I ended up rolling this in a different room, I might interpret this little cave symbol to be like, oh, there's like a burrow, like something's making a layer in here. Maybe I'd be like, oh, a watery place with a bunch of trash in it. That sounds like an oat yug. So that's definitely probably what I would throw in there. This is probably one of my least favorite faces, just because this is one of the ones I feel like it's the most difficult to interpret. It is, I know it's backwards for you guys, but here, I'll turn it outside. It's a little bit better. It's essentially an L in a square. This could be a letter. Every time I look at it, all I can think is Scrabble tile, so... But that's me, that's always the first thing that comes to my mind. But it could be a letter, it could be like any sort of document that has writing on it. It could just mean writing in general. You come across some writing. So these are really, really cool things that just allow you to get some ideas, blue sky some ideas really, really quickly. And give you ideas that you, at least for me, and it's been my experience, they're not ones I would come up with on my own. Which I really enjoy about it. And makes me do way weirder, way different things that I would normally go after. That's what I like, because it gives me a bunch of random things that then I use the power of the human brain to interpret them and try to make them make sense together. So that's number 2. And nice thing about both of these is I think these are relatively inexpensive. This is a little bit more pricey, not too much, just because it's a print-on-demand product. Just that's why it's a little bit more expensive, but also relatively inexpensive. So those are 3. Yeah, so I have Classic and Voyages. I do want to get my hands on Fantasia. That's the fantasy set, and then there's an Astro set, which is their sci-fi set. So if you run more things like Mothership or Starfinder or some other kind of sci-fi, maybe Traveler Traveler's pretty hard sci-fi. I guess Mothership kind of is too. And these maybe don't work as well for a super grounded game. But if you've got weird elements in there, which Mothership certainly does, you're going to find stuff that you're going to like with it. They're fast, they're easy, they don't take up a lot of space, they're really easy to grab. If you want to grab these and use these dice, you can really fill out like something like a 5-room dungeon really, really quickly. Especially if you have multiple sets and you can just roll them all together. For 3 for a room. Super easy. I highly recommend them. And the last one I want to talk to is not one that I have physically. It's something I have digitally. And these are Wallet Dungeons by Awkward Turtle. So I think the easiest thing for me to do is actually, I'm just going to pull it up and show it to you. So you can find them on itch.io, or as I like to call it, itch.io. Let me just search it up real quick. And they also offer... There's a fantasy version, D&D style version, and there's also a sci-fi version. So let's pull this up. You can also get them on DriveThruRPG. Let me pull these up. Alright, here we go. Let me swap it over so you guys can see what I'm looking at. Here we go. So this is it. Let's So these are really cool. Just gonna pull up a big image. Yeah, here we go. So the wallet dungeons are really easy. You just basically take as many D6 as you probably have and just throw them down. You're gonna need probably a wide area and throw them down, and then you take them and you split them up by their numbers, and then you start building. You use the die faces themselves to build them together into a little dungeon, as you can see kind of over here on the side. So they kind of show you exactly what the dice layout looks like and how they would interpret that as like a dungeon. So it's super cool. So this is a very easy way to just get a whole bunch of stuff, get a dungeon together really quickly just by grabbing a fistful of D6 and just tossing them down. Now, here's the thing, is that it's not going to give you a lot of information about what's in, like encounter-wise, what's in each dungeon chamber. You're going to need to come up with some of that. They do have a D6 roll down here for what's in each encounter. But one of the things that I probably like the most about this aspect is that they're called wallet dungeons because this basically fits on a business card, which is really, really cool. I like it. And so I've taken this and I've tweaked it a little bit just to meet my own needs a little bit better. But it kind of gives you, so you know if you roll a 1, it's a dead end. That's where the end of the dungeons are. So that's the end of a passageway. That might be the door. That might be the way in and out, etc. Passages can't touch more than 2 dice, so that you've got some sort of long corridor, kind of, and you can kind of see how these work on the right. So you have 1 that's down here, 1, 1, 2, 2, and so 2 just connects. It's just a connector, really. So here you see 4 and 6 get connected. You can see that here. 3 is a split, can't touch more than 3 dice, and so it's like usually a T intersection. So 1, 2, 3, and then this goes to 5, which is a tower. And then 4s are crossroads. You see that right in the middle here, so it touches all 4 dice, all around. And number 6 is a hall. So the halls are really interesting. You take all the D6 that you rolled together and combine them together into one large room. Now the rooms of these are kind of up to your personal interpretation. The idea is that the hall rooms will be significantly larger arenas. So if you want to have a big boss battle, that's probably in the hall. Or if you want to have a larger sort of investigation set or a larger social encounter, you figure out which thing makes sense to kind of be in that larger room. Usually that's going to be a combat, but not always, depending on what you want to do. Might be a good spot for like a really complicated trap mechanism that somebody has to deal with, or a big hazard that where just getting across the room is kind of difficult. That's a good setup for those. And then as you add the value of the neighboring dice together, that tells you what the room is, which is really cool. So ones are almost always next to 2s, but not always. So this 1 is next to a 2. So that tells you that, hey, this is just going to be quarters, and you can see that down there. And that 4 is a jail, and you can see that gone right there. 4 in the middle is, I can't really see what that is to interpret. So 4, so next to it is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. A shrine, yeah, okay. Yeah, a shrine in the middle. And 5s work kind of like 6s. So 5s are towers, so instead of the halls, you put them together and they take up a lot of square footage on the ground. Towers are tall, so you stack the D5s up. And I do believe you can have multiple towers, or sometimes it will make more sense if you roll a whole bunch of 5s instead of having one random tower that's like 6 floors high. You might have 2, 3 floor towers, which might make a little bit more sense. And you kind of futz around with the layout, with the dice, trying to get the layout that makes the most sense for you. But the wall dungeons are a lot of fun. I really like them. They're really super helpful. They're really easy to put together. So let's go with that. So yeah, you can put them together. It's awkward turtles. Like I said, everything basically fits on business card size, which is really nice. You can literally just carry it in your pocket. And if you need to play some D&D or whatever, you can roll up a dungeon real quick and just start throwing encounters in there. Now there is a And there's Wallet Stations, which is the one I actually think Wallet Stations is a little bit more elegant put together, but it works exactly the same. It's just the sci-fi version. So the sci-fi version, everything works exactly the same, except you have, instead of towers, you have cores, and instead of halls, you have bays. So it kind of all works the same. So it allows you to make space stations, essentially, which is very useful if you play any sort of sci-fi game. You'll probably be going to quite a few stations, whether those are working stations or derelict stations, which are kind of sci-fi dungeons that you might be going into and going through. So they're super useful. I do think that the way the stations work, both in the room selection and a little bit how they fit together, works just a little bit better. The wallet dungeons themselves can make some samey dungeons. So, and that's not necessarily bad. I think it's still useful as an adventure tool because it gives you a layout for a dungeon very, very quickly, or a layout for an adventure site extremely quickly. And like we said, towers go up, but there's no reason that if this is an underground dungeon, why that tower can't be some sort of like chasm that goes down or something like that. Maybe it goes down. Maybe connector points if you want to roll multiple dungeons, and you can use them as connectors to different floors, which could be really cool. And then that gives you the ability that you can make like this multi-layered dungeon, multi-level dungeon, if you want to do that with connectors and split levels and all that sort of advanced dungeon design for larger dungeons, especially if you want to do something that's like a mega dungeon. You can sit down, on a weekend and roll 3 different levels of a dungeon really quickly, and then just stock them using some other tool or however you usually stock dungeons. Like I said, there is a way to stock them here. I'm just not particularly fond of how they use it. So then they have the score for the cores, which are really interesting. It kind of gives you some ideas, but this is a nice little illustration, kind of gives you an idea of what that kind of looks like. But yeah, I mean, that's it. I really like the wallet stations. Super good. Super fun. And I believe both of them are pay what you want. I know wallet stations are. Let me double check. I believe wallet dungeons are too. Oh, he had a thing where he was doing it with Karen. And if you want to watch a walkthrough, they've got a walkthrough on here. It's awkwardturtle.itch.io. You'll find all their stuff. And these are the ones that I've used. Yeah, all of them are pay what you want, which is really nice. They come in different languages. Super useful. But yeah, I mean, these are just 3 tools that I've used that I think are really, really helpful. They're small. They're fast. They really help you put together an adventure super quickly just by themselves or by combining them with one other tool. Like if I wanted to use, so this is more of a dungeon layout tool, so I probably wouldn't use it with the wallet dungeons, but I could definitely use the story cubes as my stocking mechanic for either one of those. If I wanted to use the dice or the wallet dungeons to put them together. And then whether I was doing sci-fi or fantasy, I could use these, though it would be nice to have the sci-fi dice to add to it. Or however method you generally stock dungeons. I usually have a D6 way a 2D6 way I should say that I stock dungeons, which is just a slight fork from the basic Mincer way, from the basic D&D way, like D&D basic, sorry. The D&D basic way of stocking dungeon. I just have a slight twist on it that's my own that I like a little bit better. Where I just roll 2d6 and that tells me what's in the room very easily. But yeah, that's everything that I really wanted to share with you guys. So hopefully you find these, and I will try to leave links in the description if I remember to. We'll see if I remember to. I may or may not. If not, they're really easy to find. You can just do a quick search for that, or let's do the Rory story cubes, just so you guys can see it. Let's see the website real quick. Just to pull it up, just so you guys can see what all's available. But the other ones are super easy to find. One's on Etsy. One's on itch.io. Let's see. Show me them. Show me them all. Show them all to me. Show them all to me. Here we go. So Story Cubes Classic, Voyages, which is the one that I have these two. Actions. Have actions. So if you're struggling with that. There's a Harry Potter one, I guess. There's other here. Emergencies. That's a new one. I'm not sure I know that one. High-risk rescue missions and emergency interventions. Fantasia, that's one of the ones that I want to get. Mythological, medieval, fantasy kind of stuff. Mysteries for investigations. Primal, prehistoric times and live among animals. So that's interesting if you want. If you were doing more of a Chult kind of themed kind of campaign, you want to do a little bit more primal something, you might grab something like the Primal Dice. Do that. Astro is their space one. Heroes, athletic talents, and superpowers may be more useful if you're going to run like a superhero game. And then we're back to emergency. I don't know off the top of my head how much these cost now. I know that they're not particularly expensive, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how much they cost, and the website doesn't tell you. But, yep, that's it. I think I think the cards are still probably the most expensive one. Wallet Dungeons is very cheap. It's pay what you want, so if you don't have the means to pay somebody, obviously we want to support our creators if that's possible. But if it's not for you, I don't think that should be a barrier to not being able to use cool tools for your tabletop RPG. I think that one of the nice things about D&D and other tabletop RPGs is that they are a relatively low-cost hobby, and especially get you away from screen time, which is nice. I think for all of us. But that's it for me. I hope you find these useful. If you have your own sort of quick aids for building adventures and dungeons like that, make sure and share them in the comments below. But that's going to be it for me for this one, guys. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you guys next time. Alright? Bye-bye.